All right, let's talk about something fascinating. Imagine a library with absolutely no books, a literature with no named authors, and a curriculum that was never, ever written down. Today, we are diving deep into the incredible world of Pakistan's oral traditions, a field that academics like to call orature. I mean, really think about that for a second. We're all so used to literature meaning printed books, famous authors, the whole publishing industry. But what if the most important stories, the epics that really get to the heart of a culture, lived entirely in people's memories and were passed down through performance? Well, that's exactly what we're exploring here.
So, here's the game plan. First, we'll define what this unwritten library really is. Then, we'll look at how it was preserved. After that, we're doing a deep dive into its powerful female characters, applying some key academic theories, and finally, we'll talk about why any of this is still so important in the 21st century.
Okay, so first things first, let's get a solid grip on this core concept of orature and understand what really makes it different from your standard literature course.
This is just such a perfect way to describe it, isn't it? These stories weren't just bedtime tales. They were the main way a community passed on its values, its history, its morals, its entire worldview from one generation to the next. It was, quite literally, education without a classroom, a curriculum learned by heart around a fire.
So what really defines orator? This table lays it out pretty clearly. First, it's all about performance. It has to be sung or recited or told. It lives in the moment. Second, it's anonymous. There's no single author. These stories belong to the entire community. Third, it's incredibly diverse, thriving in tons of regional languages, not just one official national language. And finally, it's didactic. It's there to teach you something important.
Okay, so if there were no books, how on earth did this massive library of stories even survive? Well, the answer isn't on a bookshelf. It's woven right into the social fabric of the communities themselves. The culture basically created its own institutions. You had the Chopal in Punjab or the Hujra in Pashtun areas. These were communal spots where everyone would gather, and elders would recite these epic tales. It was a way of ensuring everyone was culturally literate. Then you had the professional bards, these keepers of the flame, who had memorized thousands and thousands of lines. And at its core, these stories were deeply connected to the land, reflecting a life tied to farming and herding.
And now we get to the really juicy part. For anyone studying literature with a critical eye, the way women are portrayed in these folktales is just absolutely fascinating. They completely smash the stereotypes you might find in other classic traditions.
Let's take one of the most famous Punjabi epics of all time, Heer Ranjha. It's often called the sextant of Punjabi culture because it acts like a moral and cultural compass for the whole region. But believe me, it is so much more than just a simple love story.
And this right here is the key academic insight. When Hire rebels against your family, against the local religious authority, she's not just doing it for love. Her rebellion is this powerful takedown of social and religious hypocrisy, and she is the one driving that rebellion forward. She is the active agent of change.
This slide really puts it into perspective. On the one hand, you have the typical damsel in distress, waiting around to be rescued. But on the other hand, you've got the Pakistani folk heroine. Characters like Heer or Sassy, who literally walks through a desert to find her love. They're the ones who take charge. They go through the hardship themselves. They are the subject of the story, not just the prize at the end of some hero's quest.
And this incredible female agency wasn't just in the big epic stories. If we shift over to the Pashtun regions, we find this amazing poetic form that gives us a rare, totally unfiltered look into women's private thoughts and feelings.
22. That's it. That's the total number of syllables in a Landay. It's this incredibly short, concise, and unbelievably powerful form of poetry.
And this right here is why the Landay is so important, especially for literary scholars. It's an anonymous genre, and it's almost exclusively created by women. In a culture where women's voices often weren't part of the public conversation, the Landay became this secret, powerful space for them to talk about everything: love, war, grief, joy. It's an authentic, first-person archive of their inner world.
So, how do we actually analyze these works in a formal academic way? Well, there are a couple of theoretical frameworks that are super useful here: post-colonialism and feminist theory.
From a post-colonial perspective, this literature is pure gold. Think about it. Because it was spoken and in local languages, it was incredibly hard for the British colonial powers to control, to censor, or to reshape. So it stayed this protected space of authentic cultural expression. In many ways, it was a form of quiet, powerful resistance, preserving an identity that the colonizers simply couldn't get their hands on.
And then, applying a feminist lens, which we've already started to do, shows just how radical these stories really are. Heroines like Saucy, who undertakes the quest herself, or Marvi, who defies a king to stay loyal to her own people. They aren't passive characters at all. They are the moral and active heart of their own stories, constantly pushing back against the patriarchal systems all around them.
Which brings us to the big question, right? Why should a university student today, surrounded by streaming services and global media, even care about these ancient, unwritten stories?
Because this entire world, this whole unwritten library, is at risk of disappearing. The glow of the smartphone screen is replacing the glow of the communal fire at the chopal. The regional languages that are the lifeblood of these stories, they're being pushed aside by English and Urdu. In a way, this library is burning down, not from a fire, but from simple neglect.
And that leaves us with one last, really urgent question. Studying this literature isn't just some dusty academic exercise, it's an act of preservation. As those traditional spaces for storytelling vanish, the responsibility to remember, to analyze, and to carry these voices forward falls to a new generation. The real question is, who's going to answer that call?